First of all, happy Father's Day to all our fathers who are here. We thank you, dads. We thank you for your dedication, your love, your wisdom, your guidance. I'd love to say everybody hug their dad, but we gotta. So how about this? When you get home, go ahead and hug your dad, okay? And all of you who are at home, go ahead and hug your dads. Today's message, sisters, is that we must trust God in times of injustice. This is difficult for us as human beings because in times of injustice, we believe that we can be the solution. And in many respects, that is true. But we also need to recognize that God's justice is perfect. Oftentimes, we are confused, and so it is harder for us to rectify injustices than it is for God. So we begin with our first reading from the prophet Jeremiah. Jeremiah has been called by God to preach a harsh truth to Judah, God's people, the nation of God's people. That truth is that because they have turned away from God, because they have given themselves over to pagan gods and turned away from God's law, there will be a reckoning. Very soon, there will be an invasion. The Babylonians will come down and take them from their homes, lead them off into captivity, destroy their buildings, their temples, their way of life. And so they are now attacking the prophet Jeremiah. Jeremiah is mocked. They mock him by using his own words. He says there's terror on every side. That was to help them to realize that they had to put their trust in God. They had been trusting in the political machine. They had been trusting in the thought that, well, we can do this through a treaty, or we can do this through negotiation, or we can do this on our own without the power of God at our side. And so Jeremiah is told by his friends now who have turned against him, oh, there's terror on every side. They're mocking him with his own words. And so we see Jeremiah at prayer today. Jeremiah is praying. And some of that prayer might be a little bit disturbing to us as we see him, let me live long enough to see your vengeance, Lord. Let me see what you're going to do to these people. And that's unfortunate. But in the end, he turns back to God. He turns back to him by saying, the Lord is with me like a mighty champion. My persecutors will stumble. They will not triumph. So in the end, Jeremiah is turning to God to right the injustice that is done to him. And then in our second reading, Paul's letter to the Romans, Paul is speaking about a kind of injustice when he talks about how death entered the world because of sin. That sin, of course, by Adam and Eve. And so there's a kind of injustice that people who have no sin are subject to the consequences of sin because of Adam and Eve. But at the same time, St. Paul says that God will correct, or has corrected, that injustice. Put that in quotes. God has sent his Son into the world to bring us salvation, to bring us release from sin and death, to give us courage. We need not have any fear of sin or death because Jesus, the new Adam, has come to correct that and to make things right. Which then leads us to our gospel, in which Jesus is about to send his apostles out into the world to preach the gospel. And he tells them that they can expect injustice. Just like the prophet Jeremiah, they are going into the world as prophets to proclaim the good news of salvation. But Jesus tells them that they will be rejected, that they will be persecuted, that they will be ridiculed. But then Jesus tells them something that resonates with us even today, powerful words. Do not be afraid of those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Brothers and sisters, whether it be human beings or viruses, the Christian fears nothing because our hope is in God. We do not even fear the injustices of the world because God is ultimate justice. When we think about it, we find ourselves in much the same situation. We rely on our own devices. And again, it's not to say that we don't work for justice. We do need to do that. We proclaim it. But ultimately, we need to realize that final, perfect justice will only happen in God's kingdom. Here on earth, things get confused. People seem to argue even over the most obvious injustices. And everything takes on different connotations and meaning. But God knows the hearts of human beings. God knows that which we hold in secret. God understands the motivations people have, so God understands where all the injustices are. God then, in his time and in his way, will correct all the injustices which we as human beings continue to perpetrate. Nevertheless, we trust in a God who loves us, in a God who says to us today in the gospel that we are worth more than many sparrows. The truth is, he could have said we're worth more than all the sparrows on the planet or any other creature, because our human souls are so precious to him. Trusting in God when we are surrounded by injustice is hard to do. Trusting in him to bring us through is hard to do. But like Jeremiah, like Paul, like Jesus, we turn to our Heavenly Father in prayer, and we know that his love will win out over every injustice.